This is the January 16, 2019 regular meeting of the Children, Seniors, Families Committee, 2 p.m.
Hello? Yeah. Get everybody started. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm so sorry. I was in San Rafael for a hearing for BACMed, and so we just got here, so I appreciate you being flexible, and I told Supervisor Cortese that we'd be starting at 10 after. So I just wanted to give everybody a moment to just relax and let you know that we're going to get started in just a few minutes. I wanted to just say, though, we're going to defer item 5 on the agenda, and we have one of our colleagues whose family member is a little ill, so we're going to let them go deal with that. And then we're going to move item 11, and this is the report on the Second Harvest Food Bank and SSA's collaborative efforts to number 1. I'm sorry, we're going to hear that first on our regular agenda. All right, so we'll just take a minute. And Dave, I was just saying that I was late and told you to not be here till 10 after. So thank you for your flexibility. Oh, thank you very much, Kathy. So we're going to just do introductions. Ignacio, we'll start with you, and then we'll come down the path.
Good afternoon, Ignacio Guerrero, Director for the Department of Child Support Services.
Bob Inacucci, Social Services.
Good afternoon, Rob Coelho from County Counsel's Office.
Cindy Chavez, member of the Board of Supervisors.
Dave Cortese, Board of Supervisors.
John Mills on behalf of the County Executive's Office.
Great, and so we'll begin with public comment, and this is to speak to an item that is not on the agenda, but within the purview of the committee. So I'm going to invite up Scott Largent, Ron Hansen, and Stephen Betts. And if you all could just line up would be great, and just introduce yourselves as you come forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Largent. I've been reading lots of audits lately. I started reading a lot of the county council's one from 1988. I believe that one was typed. It's a very, very old audit. I like to try to compare the differences in the responses from departments. A lot of these are helpful, but when you have such a large gap, it starts to get a little confusing. A lot of different things were going on back in the 80s here in the county, and I would expect for you guys to possibly maybe make that one a priority pretty soon here. We had a lot of issues with the whistleblower program, and we kind of it was almost like a staff report. They considered it like a little mini audit to basically review that end of the county counsel's office, but it just seems kind of weird. We had so many problems with that end of it, but why wouldn't we do a complete audit? Now, once we dig deep into the county counsel's office, we're going to start to realize what I come in here a lot and talk about. The Independent Defense Counsel office ran by Sylvia Perez. That little ghost office over there on Julian over there, where of course you guys are located at 33 West Julian over there. I truly do not believe Sylvia Perez is there. You walk in there and you talk to people and they don't even know what I am even talking about, who I'm asking for. Okay, they kind of send you in circles. They don't know. They get out these brochures and booklets. They try to figure out who Sylvia Perez is, who the IDO is. I've said what the IDO is. Okay, I believe it's cover-up lawyers for the county. I believe they declare conflicts of interest on cases to cover up people's civil rights violations. These cases, like mine, should have gone through the public defender's office. If there was a conflict, it goes to the alternate defender's office. Well, the county council has been rigging that process, sending these cases through the alternate defender's office to declare a conflict, then to bump into the IDO. So it becomes out of sight, out of mind. If these cases were handled at the public defender's office, they would get up to fighting shape, and cases like mine, where it's outright civil rights violations, it's outright harassment, they would be up to fighting speed. But when we kick it on down the curve to Sylvia Perez, all she does is pull the levers and switches and makes our lives a living hell in court. This is evidence right here with what they did to Victor Maris in court right here. They played him like a puppet in there. They rigged the judges. They rigged the system. They did the same thing with my Bullhorn trial. And they did the same thing with a man named Kerry Andrew Crittenden. He was a homeless advocate. You see a lot of stuff online about this poor man. The IDO, through Sylvia Perez, through Sharkey Thompson, which is one of their lawyers, absolutely railroaded this guy. Same attorney that Victorious had. Brandon Barrett's another one of them. We know the scam. We understand it. And if we were to audit the county counsel's office properly, the whole public would know what's going on. Thank you. Appreciate everything.
Thank you, Scott.
Good afternoon, supervisors and committee members. My name is Ron Hansen. I'm the co-chair or the assistant chair of the Juvenile Justice Commission, and I'm speaking on the commission's behalf. Among other duties, the commission is charged with inspecting the county's Receiving, Assessment, and Intake Center, or the RAIC. This is the facility that, after receiving youth who have been removed from their homes or elsewhere, transitions them to foster care. Despite the nearly year-long uncertainty about the viability of the RAIC's current location, the Juvenile Justice Commission has attempted to remain engaged with the stakeholders and the decision makers, expressing our increased concern about the effects of this uncertainty on the staff and, by extension, on the youth of this facility whom they are charged with serving. Per our most recent information, the RAIC is today housed in a facility whose occupancy lease has expired. Instability at the RAIC has been compounded by staff and leadership turnover and discontinuity, with inadequate staff expertise to de-escalate situations and sheriff's deputies being called to perform duties appropriately performed by staff. A result has been the criminalization of the dependents in the county's care. We believe this situation is being ameliorated, but damage has been done. Therefore, we respectfully urge this committee to engage in a study session focused on the RAIC and its future, with the goal of enlightening this committee and the public and articulating an achievable vision for this critically important link in the county's social safety net. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Welcome.
Good afternoon, supervisors and members of the committee. My name is Stephen Betts. I'm on the Juvenile Justice Commission. I have a career that was in services to children and families. I worked for a number of years at the Children's Shelter when we had it on Union Avenue. I was there for about 4 years, and at the time I left, I was acting as deputy director. On the day that I came in to take over one of the units, it was a unit of 5 to 12-year-old boys. It was an intensive unit. It was built to house 23 kids. There were 35 boys in there when I took over. It was in absolute chaos. There were kids sleeping on cots on the floor, on couches. I was receiving 30, 40 incident reports a week. So one of the first tasks I undertook was to bring stability to the unit. And one of the things I recognized as I looked at what was happening, what was working, what was not working, was that my most experienced staff were very rarely involved in incidents with the kids. So my conclusion was that training, experience, consistency were the keys to stabilization. I applaud the fact that the county's moved away from a shoulder-based model and is aspiring to replace kids more quickly. I had the chance recently to visit the RAIC, and was greeted by two people I've known from when I worked at the shelter. They're still there 20 years later. At the time we were there, they were housing just 5 kids. But as I spoke to them, I learned about some of the struggles that they're facing there. They indicated that there's been a change of leadership. There's been a lot of staff turnover, so a lot of less experienced staff working there. And one of the biggest challenges is the mix of kids they have there. They have kids from newborns right up to 17, 18 years old. And among the kids are some kids who are new to the system, and those who've been in the system, failed placements, and are coming back, have a lot of emotional and other issues. And so this can lead to a lot of unrest, a lot of incidents escalating quickly. And it's very difficult there in that environment to separate the kids and to ease tensions. What I found particularly disturbing was the fact that the sheriff's deputies have been brought in to help de-escalate some of the situations. I believe that there are steps that we can take to bring back stability to this RAIC, to make it a safer, more inviting, homely place. And I join my colleagues in urging that we put a study group together and look at how we can improve things as they stand at the RAIC.
Thank you very much. With that, I just want you to know I heard your comments. I want to think a little bit about about that request. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move on to our regular agenda. And Dave, what I was suggesting is that we move item 11, and this is the Second Harvest Food Bank presentation first. We're going to defer item 5. We have a staff member has a family illness. And then we'll go through the rest of the agenda. Is that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Agreed.
So we're going to go ahead and dive in, and we'll start with item 11. And as they get settled, we'll just move our consent calendar, which are minutes, and then the change in the agenda. Dave, so we can get a motion on that?
So moved.
Okay, in a second. All right, that passes unanimously. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Chavez, Supervisor Cortese, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight the Second Harvest Food Bank and the Social Services Partnership. For over 25 years, the Department of Employment and Benefits and Second Harvest Food Bank, we have collaborated to abate hunger and food insecurity in Santa Clara County. My name is Rafaela Perez, and I'm the Employment Services Director with the Department of Employment and Benefits Services. And with me is Tracy Weatherby, Vice President and Community Engagement and Policy with Second Harvest Food Bank, who will be presenting this report.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us here. We really value the relationship that we have with Santa Clara Social Services and many departments within Santa Clara that have been helpful to us. I want to give you a little bit of information of what we've accomplished in the last year. You know, over the last fiscal year, we distributed 48 million pounds of food to 190,000 county residents. And we distribute about 35% of that, I think, directly ourselves, but the rest is distributed through 199 partners at 645 sites. We're one of the few food banks in the country that is able to give that food to partners at no cost. There are no costs or fees. So most nonprofits, you know, that are feeding people are probably getting their food from us, or at least a large portion of it. 50%, over 50% of what we distribute is fresh produce, and 24% is protein. We also have a renewed focus on nutrition education. We implemented a policy several years ago. We don't distribute any sugar-sweetened beverages or candy. And so we're really trying to focus on education as well as the food itself. We're also a key partner for the county on CalFresh. You know, over 82,000 households receive CalFresh in Santa Clara County, and almost 60 of those are children under 17 or seniors over 60. And in terms of outreach, we have a whole team, multilingual team, Vietnamese, Chinese, Spanish, and English, who work to get people aware of their CalFresh opportunities, get their applications in, and we work with the county very closely to make sure those applications are approved wherever eligible. The other piece of things that we work on is on the school and summer meals and on the policy side, and that's really my department. We work closely with school districts to demystify the federal bureaucracy to help them take advantage of school meals programs so they can feed more kids. There are a lot of opportunities to have universal breakfast, to feed more kids lunch, and in many cases to feed kids snacks and supper. And that can all be done with federal dollars if a school is high enough need, and so that's a program we really focus on heavily. We partner with the schools, the nonprofits, and government agencies over the summer to get summer meals out to those same kids, and there were about 400,000 summer meals delivered in the last fiscal year. We work to make sure that happens at places where the kids are, whether it's camps or libraries, housing complexes. We had a very successful program at Valley Palms last year. And we're also trying to make sure that we're part of letting people know where the food resources are. So we did a big back-to-school campaign this year working with really all of our school districts and through our Child Nutrition Coalition, which includes many of the school districts in the county. And we're trying to encourage people to both apply for free meals, get the groceries they need, and apply for CalFresh. So those are just a few of the efforts we've been working on. We also work on the policy side on things like speaking out against public charge. We've been working closely with social services on getting the word out about our resources during the government shutdown, and we're trying to find the right people to understand if we could be doing some new food distributions at places where people are not being paid or they're furloughed or they're not being paid, either case. So those are just a few of the highlights. Do you have any questions on what we've been working on?
I do not. Do you have any questions, Dave? I don't, but I do want to just say how much we appreciate our partnership with you, and how much I think as a board we appreciate your creativity and innovation, and really working tightly both with the social services agency, but with all the schools in our valley as well, which is no easy feat. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to now move to our Transitional Aged Youth Annual Report, and this is item 6. So if we could have our presenters.
Good afternoon. Francesca Ledreg, Department of Family and Children's Services Director.
I'm sorry, Dave was just, you missed 4. So, but I apologize. We'll go ahead and go in this order. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, my bad, Dave. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Maricela Martinez, Project Manager, Department of Family and Children's Services.
Well, thank you for taking us sooner on the agenda.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you. I'm sure the other people are like, yeah, great.
You're right.
All right, sorry about that.
So thank you for the opportunity to present a summary of our accomplishments and our goals for the upcoming year for the transitional age youth. Some of the goals that we have reached in 2017 and 18 they're numerous, but we wanted to highlight a couple of them. One of them is that the department participated in the HAC Foster Youth in 2016 and 17, and we continue to make waves in ensuring that our transitional age youth have laptops. And through the partnership and collaboration with Pivotal, and formerly known as the Silicon Valley Children's Fund, we have been able to partner and ensure that for 2016-17, 66 youth received a laptop. In addition to the work that we've been doing with the HAC Foster Youth and the partnership with Pivotal, we have been working with the Walter S. Johnson Foundation and working on some beta testing that began through the hackathon, and it's an application referred to as Think of Us. And this application is for foster youth who can use an application to create their own online transition plans. With this project, we are hoping that we can utilize the technology to support the youth in a more meaningful, up-to-date way than the way that we normally do with paper products and so forth. And this is handy for them to use and control. It's been an ongoing effort, and we hope to complete this by December of 2019. We are also always looking at a means to ensure that our foster youth have the technological solutions and or access to be able to support their growing needs from both an educational standpoint and just support in terms of having hands-on ability to get information. The second is that we were working on finalizing 5 housing slots for youth 16 and 17 that will bring our transitional housing slots to 32. Third, we added 2 employment counselors to the Career Development Unit. As you know, in 2018, we increased the number of foster youth participating in the Intern and Earn program from 100 previously to 150 this year. And that really was a result of the 2 added employment counselors. The goal with bringing on these 2 additional employment counselors is that we will be able to provide the youth with the support that they need for increased job preparedness, workshops, skill development, and the mentoring and support in order for these youths to obtain a job and retain the job, which is very key. Some of the highlights for 2017 and 18 is that on May 22nd, we held the Foster Youth Summit. It was held at the City Hall Rotunda, and 122 youth attended. The title was Unity in Diversity, and We Are Different. And I just want to be able to say that the work with the transitional age youth is a very big partnership with the Bill Wilson Center, the Santa Clara County Office of Education, and again, I mentioned Pivotal. It is these external partners that are really helping us meet the needs of the youth, of our foster youth. During this summit, there was dancing, a fashion show, performances by the foster youth, and it was another means to be able to celebrate and bring awareness to Foster Youth Month. We were able to showcase some youth. They were speakers, and they spoke of their incredible stories and the story of resiliency and hope. It's events such as this that draws in community partnership, government officials, and everyone to really donate and support our foster youth. From that, we were able to develop our very first annual graduation. So the event was a monumental success. We had never, if you will, partnered or hosted a foster youth graduation. We had our external partners definitely celebrating our youth, but as a county, we had not come together and elevated our youth for their accomplishments. We recognized 110 youth for their milestones, and again, this event was sponsored in partnership with CASA, the Bill Wilson Center, and Pivotal. And I also want to thank the Board of Supervisors because you provided our youth with a certificate, and I think it was incredibly meaningful for our youth to know that they're walking away with a memento that demonstrates just how important they are, and that we're celebrating their accomplishments. I want to take the time to say that the 49ers football team also put together a very special video for our youth.
Nice.
And they have agreed to host the graduation, the second annual graduation for 2019. So 49ers are supporting our transitional age youth. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So great community support. Again, through the support of the Board of Supervisors, we were able to locate and purchase a new building for the hub. We continue to meet work groups to ensure that the hub planning meets the needs and space for our youth. And again, the goal is to create this as a one-stop shop so that all of our youth can get mental health services, wellness, employment, and education. And our goal, anticipated goal, is opening in 2021. I talked a little bit about the Foster Youth Summer Intern and Earn program, and we are going to continue to increase our efforts towards that. And also, the Bill Wilson Center became the contract for our independent living program. And so through their leadership in this, they were able to offer an e-curriculum, and that has increased the youth's participation in ILP services. The hub, where it sits now at the San Jose Family Resource Center, has been redecorated, and we continue to partner with him to ensure that the output and outcome measures for this program is being researched and that it's effective. So we continue to work with Bill Wilson, who has, again, increased the number of food availability for our youth, and are really working on an engagement strategy, including a leadership program for our youth. What is the name of that leadership program?
Youth Leadership Council.
Oh, there you go. Youth Leadership Council. I met with the team of 4, and just very excited about their enthusiasm about being leaders and being a part of the partnership to increase services for our youth. So that's a great thing. And then lastly, another great accomplishment is that the County of Santa Clara, we added a new scholarship program through the Combined Giving campaign this year. And as you know, this gift-giving campaign enables county employees the opportunity to make contributions from their paychecks to support higher education for our foster youth. And my understanding is that we were able to raise approximately $10,000 in donations for our very first gift-giving foster youth scholarship fund. Would you like to go over the accomplishments? Excuse me, next steps? I'll have Maricela, who is our program manager.
So our next steps for the are to continue our work with the Joint Foster Youth Task Force and create pathways to success. The Department of Family and Children's Services continues to collaborate with County Office of Education to increase support for the Foster Vision database. We continue to work with Fleet and Facility Services to establish our new hub center on 2021 spring. We're also working with FION to look at cohorts of 9th graders to really work on making sure that every 9th grader has access and is connected to services.
And I just want to point out that the Foster Youth Aligned Action Network, it was part of the Joint Foster Youth Task Force, and so we've committed Maricela and Carla to those work groups to ensure that we are meeting and working with this the FION to address the needs of our 9th graders moving forward.
We also have a current contract with our Hop Skip Drive to really ensure that our kids have ensure stability in their school of origin, so they transport our kids to and from different schools. And lastly, working to expand services in South County Hub.
So you're good?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know. We have one speaker, and so I'll ask Sparky if she can come forward, and then I'll go to the committee for comments or questions.
I also have a report.
And could Frank, I'm sorry, can you move it to 2 minutes? I meant to do that earlier. And you have a report for us?
Cutting my time.
No, actually, we should have done that consistently throughout the meeting, but.
That's all right, my report. What I did is I noticed in the report it didn't have a lot about housing and outcomes, and that is really important to us to document that. And so I have a report here that I'll present to you for all 3 of the housing categories, comparing our outcomes at Bill Wilson Center with the state benchmarks. I just want to highlight a couple of the areas. One is the idea, if we can look at the first page, where it talks about length of stay. THP Plus, Bill Wilson Center now has an average length of stay of almost 25 months. The state average is only 15. So it really shows that young people are staying in our THP Plus housing longer, and so the outcomes are going to be better. So that is one of the benchmarks that they look at, John Burton Foundation, because they can now stay up to 3 years. So you should start seeing that average length of stay increase, though the state has not been able to do it with other providers. The other thing is sometimes we only look at outcomes and not where kids start. So if you look at the bottom page there, it looks at, where kids start as far as who doesn't have employment at the beginning and how much it improves over time, looking at THP plus 52 going to 72, and the state pretty much just staying the same on education or on the employment. The last one, since I only have 2 minutes now, I wanted to look at the bottom column on housing outcomes. On THP plus foster care, 96% of the youth leaving our program are going to a positive placement, and for THP plus, 80% are finding their own rental assistance and placement versus only 50% for the state. So 80% of our kids are going into rental housing, which is a huge accomplishment. Overall, 92% are being housed after they leave THP plus. If I can, the last stat I really want to show you that shows that something we should be concerned about is for THP plus foster care. You see this number, 46% of our young people are living with relatives or other person in stable housing compared to 22 for the state. Part of the reason there's so many waiting or being home is because there aren't enough THP plus slots. So a lot of the kids are going back home or with a friend to wait until there's an opening in THP plus. So this is the kind of data that I really want us to continue to look at when I say we need more slots, because that's a red flag that we're putting kids in a holding pattern because there's no place for them to move up to THP plus. And we have talked about that, and the department is adding slots.
Thank you, Sparky.
Yes.
Dave, do you have any comments or questions on this report? Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I have an overarching question. Do we have some kind of umbrella organizing methodology, I guess would be the way to put it, for those CBOs and other agencies that are dealing with this population out there, in our county? And I just ask that because it's a very, very almost lay person's question, but as an elected official, I'm out and invited into this fundraiser and that fundraiser and this meet and greet type of situation and this tour and that tour, and it just strikes me sometimes when I ask people what their county involvement is, it's very little, of course, and some maybe not. That might not be the case, but it just has raised this question for me over the last year in my own mind. What do we do to sort of pull all the agencies and providers and folks that are out there together, or do we convene them in any sort of way, and do we even go further than that and try to do evidence-based work with them? And I understand Bill Wilson Center's almost an anomaly in the sense that it's been such a leader as an organization, but I'm almost kind of talking about those folks that would appear to be smaller agencies than Bill Wilson.
So two things. The SSA's Office of Research and Evaluation is becoming more robust and being able to help us support some of these programs and to truly evaluate them from both internally, our responsibility and our codes and what we're doing, but also from a contract standpoint to look at those pieces. The other is I tried to stress in the presentation that a lot of the services for transitional age youth really do come from large support, partnership, and collaboration with various organizations such as Pivotal and the Bill Wilson Center. I don't know that we have what you are suggesting, and I do think that that's an excellent recommendation because we should all be coming to the table to figure out what pieces. I think the approach that we have right now is really great, but I'm not sure that we have seen what it looks like, if you will, if they're all the puzzle pieces that are put apart, how we put that puzzle together. So I will see how we can start coordinate that conversation and with our partners see what we can do.
Yeah, and Dave, let me weigh in on this.
Point.
Thank you.
And I
Sorry,
just want,
Francesca.
if I just say for my part, for this moment, just getting the question answered as you did is enough for me to start thinking some more. I didn't come and walk, in with a referral or anything like that, but I think it also, besides us doing evidence-based work or coordinating and convening, it's also this thing about there's a tremendous amount of resources that we have available or can broker, and sometimes, and not even necessarily in social services. Measure A, for example, this people in this population who are looking for housing and so forth. So I, again, found myself out there in the community saying, have you connected with Key Lee? Have you connected with the Department of Children and Family Services?
Let me just add.
I'll defer to you.
Well, actually, no, let me add one point that I think is really important, just as a next step. So one of the requests I made as part of the completion when we did the foster care task force was to have Dr. Smith and the staff come back at mid-year with a set of priorities, because as one bucket, but a subset of those priorities was to do essentially the same kind of analysis we did on housing, which is to take a look at all the services that we're providing, how many young people and families are in our system, and then what does it cost to do that? Because I think the point that you raise, and I think the research team that Francesca is referring to are really critical, because I think, and actually I'm going to quote Sparky. Where is she? So I'm quoting you. That Sparky has for a while really been challenging us to look at the number of people that we have in our system, children and families, where they are in our system, so that we can anticipate how to provide services to them. Because right now we really are providing services based on emerging needs, but not necessarily emerging trends, because we're not looking at the population and this group that we have in need in a strategic enough way. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. And then the other thing that I want to point out that I think that you raised that's really critical is that Bill Wilson Center is obviously, been a partner with us for a long time. Pivotal, we're funding a subset of programs that they do, but they're not a funded partner. And then we have groups like Uplift and others that are doing very specific kinds of work. So part of the reason I was interested in getting the study is that study that was done on housing had enormous impact in how the county thought about its investment strategy. And I think in some respects we've been essentially dealing with emergencies, the CAN Center, the hub not quite working right, the issues being raised by the rake. We are really being driven by crisis instead of by a strategic plan that helps young people thrive. So when this comes back to the board, as part of mid-year, I was really hoping, we pulled out what we thought needed to be prioritized. You and I did as part of that action. But I'm really interested in seeing whether or not that study can be one of our main components, because I think it'll help us prioritize the rest of the work. And I do feel for the staff that I know every time you see me coming, you're like, oh my God, another program, which I'm going to do to somebody else on the agenda today, but not you today. But that hopefully by doing a study like that, I think to your point, Dave, what it does, and I think what that housing study did, is it drove all of these partners into one room to have a discussion about the topic. And then one other thing I'll add, I'm sorry, just because it's on my mind, and I'll say this to Francesca, is I know that one of the reasons I've been creating some concern with the department, among others, is that I have been wanting us to not define a foster care child as the way the federal government does or even the way the state does, because once a kid is in our custody, custodial care, or even on our radar, treating them like a human being that needs service, irrespective of where they fall in and out of that technical definition, which I also think if we do this study, I think it'll give us the flexibility to know how far out we can spread resources compared to the way we're doing it now.
Yeah, great. I agree with those thoughts. I would just, by way of analogy, and this is a little bit of inside baseball for us because I'm not sure the rest of the people in the room today have worked on, the immigration issues and those buckets like we did. But I thought you took a great leadership role in, convening people at the upper levels of the county and management together and said, historically we've had all these buckets and programs. What do they look like when you put them in one place? Where do we have redundancy? Where do we have synergy? And if we invest more, how do we keep everybody pulling in the same direction? And it's just those kind of thoughts. It seems to me every once in a while, that kind of an effort is needed. Whether there needs to be actually some kind of, sort of a hub for the agencies and the school districts and so forth as an actual convening, a physical convening, as well as sort of this, us taking a look even further at what's out there, as you were just describing, and how do we focus it more. Again, that was a question that I don't have an answer for, but I appreciate that it sounds like people are interested in that idea or that thought. So I look forward to working with you on the mid-year as a member of the Board of Supervisors, as and beyond, as to where that's going to go.
And one other thing I'll just say too, that for Bob, Bob and I have been having a conversation, which this might be the right place to just introduce this, that I do think that I am fearful that that we're going to start to taper off in terms of resource availability. And I think what that's going to require us to do is be much more strategic. And the one challenge I see in this whole area is that I think that we are driven to spend money by the federal government in particular in ways that at a local level we might not think are that productive, honestly. And so the other reason that I think that this study needs to be done relatively quickly is I think it will help us think more in a more engaged way about a lot of different subjects. And I think one, just as an example, is really diving in deeper to use the spine that you created with the School Link services as a framework for a service delivery model that could be shifted. So I want to just say thank you very much. This was a really helpful report, and I appreciate it. I got your question. I got the answers to the questions I had about foster vision, which I think are really critical. And on the hub, one thing I am going to recommend is that when we do our retreat, which I'll talk about at the end of the meeting, we might want to pull the capital programs out of the operational programs just to make sure that all of our capital programs are being prioritized countywide, because now we have to compete with everybody, and I'm particularly mindful of that relative to the hub and where it is in its process, and and even to the rake and where it is in its process. But we may have other capital programs that you want to highlight for us, because some of them we've already started to deal with, I know, with the new building, but there may be others. So thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to get my numbers straight, and I'm going to go back to item 4, and that's our children's assessment report. And if I can invite up the presenters, and apologize again for confusion. No. Yeah. Are you being separated for a reason? Some of you, we're afraid, are going to behave badly. Dr. Dewan?
Yes. Can count on education to be...
That's right. Count on those teachers to talk during the presentation. No, I'm kidding. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, supervisors and committee, for inviting us back to provide this report on assessments for children and youth in Santa Clara County. My name is Evelyn Ho. I'm a senior community health planner, health program specialist with the Public Health Department, and each of our speakers will introduce themselves, many of whom you know well, as we go along. By way of background, we don't have slides up. Sorry. But I'll get started. By way of background, we have Public Health Department convened the key leaders and stakeholders in response to a question that was posed at the September 28th committee meeting when we presented the Children's Health Improvement Plan. The question was fairly broad, so we cast a wide net to look at developmental, social, emotional, behavioral, and educational assessment services for children in the county. As we were working on this process, we expanded it to include screenings as well. Screenings are population-level validated tools that are used to identify emerging issues that may need further assessment. So to flag issues that may present themselves, and they're used population-wide regardless of a presentation. Then from there, assessments provide a deeper dive into the extent of the area of concern and the impact on the child's health. So we broadly looked at screenings and assessments. We focused primarily on the public sector agencies. We know that there are private sector organizations that are doing some of this work. In the behavioral health domain, those services are primarily in the public sector provided through behavioral health services, but in the private domain, there may be private pediatric specialists that are providing those services. In the educational domain, which we'll go into, both public and private pediatricians are referring to Early Start and utilizing, and children and families are utilizing school districts, and the assessment process is through there. Occasionally, if families are deemed ineligible, they may choose to access additional assessment services through self-pay and other means, but that's a little bit outside of the scope of what we're presenting today. Then from there, we grounded our work in the lived experiences of families and really looking at what families are experiencing as they are navigating these multiple systems of care to identify where some of the opportunities may lie. And of course, there are opportunities for further analysis. This is a high-level overview of those multiple systems of care with additional direction from this committee about if there are particular areas of focus. Turn it over to Kathleen.
So I'm Kathleen King from Healthier Kids Foundation, and I was the page that just went by. There we go. So we looked at who is part of the work group and who has some involvement in the assessments. And Early Start and San Andreas Regional Center play very key roles for all those in the public area, but as well as in the private area. And the school districts and the county offices kind of follow the next step. There is the behavioral health services that First Five was very involved in helping put together, which is the Kids Connection Network, KidScope, Schooling Services. Those are where we see a lot of the behavioral ages and stages assessments done. And then, of course, there's medical along with the physical screenings, which our area covers, as well as public health nursing, First Five with ages and stages and their screenings. And then pediatricians in the Valley clinics also do quite a bit of assessment, and so do other pediatricians. And then the priority population is really supported by social service agencies. Parents Helping Parents has a lot of the personal experiences with the families that they can speak to.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mary Ann Dewan, County Superintendent of Schools in Santa Clara, and it's great to be here to have an opportunity to provide this quick overview. What we wanted to share on the next slide is about the screening and assessment system elements, the components in the private sector. As described in detail in item 4, attachment A, already in your packet, we did provide a summary of the major system components, but focused primarily on those who provide screening and assessments. I'll provide this overview, but we do have representatives of the programs here to answer questions in greater detail at the conclusion of the presentation if necessary. As you can see from the header on this slide, the system of care does impact youth from birth into adulthood, and the system of care will vary for children throughout these different age assessments. Assessments can be broadly categorized as behavior, social, emotional, educational, developmental, and medical or physician provided. In the domain of behavioral and social emotional assessments, services are provided primarily by the Santa Clara County Behavioral Health Services Division. Kids Connections Network, a partnership of Behavioral Health Services and First Five, provides these services. In the domain of development and educational, for young children, the Early Start Program, a program of the County Office of Education and the San Andreas Regional Center, provide assessments for social communication, motor, adaptive, and cognitive development. At the age of 3, children are transitioned to local educational agencies and school districts who then become responsible for the assessment process, and school-age children who present with not yet identified areas of concern that impact learning are assessed by local school districts. Children with specific eligible conditions may receive services from the San Andreas Regional Center. For concerns identified from the medical perspective, pediatricians provide development and social emotional screenings, medical diagnoses, and referrals into our system of care. Public health nurses provide screenings to children in foster care and families participating in the Nurse-Family Partnership. And the Healthier Kids Foundation provides dental, hearing, and vision screenings, and also referrals into community-based settings in addition to healthy lifestyle, Medi-Cal enrollment, and parent resources. And finally, the California Children's Services provides care for children with specific mental health conditions. In the public sector, the specific pathways a child and family must navigate through the programs is totally dependent on the nature of the prompting concern, the age of the child, and the referral source.
Alrighty, I'm Maria Dane. I'm Executive Director for Parents Helping Parents. We serve 5,000 families a year who are raising children with special needs. Typically, around 92% of our families have had their child assessed and diagnosed, while 8% are undiagnosed and awaiting assessment. I wanted to speak a little about the experience of families in the system. Some aspects of the system are working very well, while for some subpopulations, they experience significant challenges in the system. Within each system of care, there is some delay in getting assessments. And for some families, they need to pass through 2 systems of care before they receive services. And the combination of the delays that go from one system into the other system can lead to a deferral of services by up to a year and a half from the time the parent begins to suspect something is wrong. Much of the burden of the coordination, follow-up, and advocacy is dependent on families, which is logical because 4-year-olds don't sit up one day and ask to be assessed, right? So families' capacity and ability to fulfill the role of their child's medical advocate is varied in our county. The system, by its nature, has some no's. It has no, your child looks like it's like he or she is typically developing and does not need an assessment, or no one is available to assess your child for 6 months. The systems have no's. And some families are able to navigate those no's well and receive services for their children. But other families struggle to negotiate past the no and get answers on a timely basis. Barriers of accessing services include families' belief, families' knowledge, their language ability, their literacy, their time and availability, their money, and increasingly, their fear of utilizing public systems of care because some member of their family may be undocumented. Anecdotally, we see from these families that their assessments take longer, their assessments are less comprehensive, and most tragically, we see that sometimes the child is in a wait to fail situation. Until the child fails, they do not get assessed. So a lot of good assessment is being done in this county. However, there is a subpopulation of families for whom our assessment systems are neither timely nor quality.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Jolene Smith, CEO for First Five Santa Clara County. Thank you for raising this question. So that's the first thing I want to do. Leaders are really important to our community to raise the questions that help us get, as we work in the community, our act together, especially around screening and assessment. This work group, small but mighty, came together to really peel the onion and to really identify where the access, the challenges, and where the barriers are. And some And some of our discussion really focused in around what are the elements of an effective system, beginning with screens and ending with solid, comprehensive treatment interventions, and plans that parents can access, as you just heard, but most importantly, that have impact on the child's healthy development, so that the child and the family supported, but the child is able to thrive. So some of what we came up with you see before you, but I think that it's really important that we looked at it, those elements, as a whole, because we knew that in this robust county environment, we have great elements or parts of a system, but they stand alone. So what are the comprehensive elements of a system? And this list is a beginning, but it certainly isn't an end. And we really need to boil down to what does coordination and efficiency mean? Does that mean navigation for families? Does it mean effective practice so families know where to go and can have and really a voice in advocacy for their child's well-being? When you look at evaluation for impact, does it mean that we have a robust data structure that ensures the spirit of continuous improvement, but most importantly demonstrates the impact that we want for our kids? We have to take elements of what we identify as a system and drill deeper. And that's kind of why we're here today, to have you help us drill deeper or call us to action to drill deeper, and then come back and be able to present to you a really effective outline or direction for an effective system to be created. And I think that I'm focused, of course, on the prenatal through 5 experience, and then other folks here represent elementary, and then some represent higher developmental needs in our community. You do partly as well. We need to go from prenatal through 22. And the system has to be transitional, and it has to be warm hands off for our families and our practitioners, with a strong workforce development underpinning the whole thing that we all agree on. We need to agree on assessment tools, we need to agree on screens, but we really need to have this common understanding of what that North Star looks like and what those common elements really are. I think what's important around system partners, or to really emphasize the importance of system partners, supervisors, is that not one entity can do it alone. It involves the public agencies, but it also involves our private, other public entity partners, because not one system can contain, especially with the research that we know around natural support systems, oftentimes have the greatest impact on a child's healthy development. Mary Ann, if you click it. They don't know with me when to click and when not, because I can. So, okay, thank you. So here we are at opportunities, and again, supervisors, this small work group came up with what we identify currently exists and what we did with our system, with our current systems of screening and assessment and treatment in place. We did look at the elements that currently exist in what we found to have great impact in parts, but it needs further explorations, as I mentioned before. We need to really look at and enhance and increase our system-level partnership. We need to really look at who is already working in this space. We have some great opportunities now with, for example, the Children's Health Improvement Plan, to really look at where can we better coordinate, and what are the questions we're looking for. And so today, to wrap up, we're looking to you to say, what are more questions that we should be looking at to answer? Some I mentioned earlier. But then again, we would like to recommend as a work group, perhaps with both of you in your offices, a study session to really get a handle on what we're trying to create in Santa Clara County. If there's the hunger and the desire to really create a comprehensive screening and assessment system in our county, which is possible, then what do we really need to look at? So thank you today for letting us present to you what we found, but we look forward to this. This is a beginning.
So thank you. And I saw your next. Oh, it was thank you. Thank you back. So let me just say, reiterate a little bit of what prompted my question, and then talk a little bit about next steps. One of my concerns is that I think we are overstating the idea that we have a system of care in our community for our kids. We have, and I think your point that we have caring elements, but we don't have a system of care, right? So one of the challenges, even reading the report, was that the way we consider and access the difference between an assessment screenings, assessment, diagnostics, and the lack of fluidity in terms of being able to access resources that families need. And so let me just put that in one kind of big bucket. And then the other is to say that there are emerging trends that we see with alarming regularity, particularly as it relates to, on the physical health side, we're still, really working to become the most diabetic society in the world. And on a mental health perspective, not just us, but we see a global, really, explosion of mental health challenges, not just in adults, but in really young children now. I mean, really young children. So what I think would be of value is if you all could take a look at the not just the services that we provide, but really being able to call out very distinctly the gaps in service. Because my belief is that that we don't have a system of yes, and we don't have a system of appropriate placement or diversion. Like that we just, because we don't have a system and we have pieces of a system, that there's no, the on-ramps and off-ramps are catch as catch can. And I think all of us, including myself, I would say, have both personally, but I've talked to families who really, this challenge is really significant. So if we could take a deeper dive on what exists and where we think there are gaps in service, but I'm going to recommend some partners that I think need to be at the table, because I actually think they are part of the reason we have a challenge. And that is, I think there is value in us taking a look at including one or two insurance companies to sit with us, because I think the no comes from what can be paid for versus what's our responsibility. And then, so that's one. And then the other is, I think community organizations that are quasi-public like SARC is really worth having at the table head on, because I would actually, we get a lot of complaints. So let me just say this. I represent downtown. I represent the poorest part of the community. So by the time someone comes to me, it's because someone has said, this is, you dial this number. And the number of complaints we get about public entities and our interaction with the community is really significant. And it's got to be worse than what I'm hearing, given who I represent, that folks don't usually know to call, their representative. So I think having like Family Health Plan, just because I think they're really smart, they really understand their business. I know that and even Valley Health, because it's not, it's not Medicare, right? Like, so we need a private insurer, but I would take people whose business it is to assess when someone comes in and when someone comes out, and SARC would be a good example. And what I would do is not have elected officials involved in this at all. I wouldn't Brown Act it. I'd put people in a room and let people tell their truths, so that we really can, in an intellectually honest way, come back and have a study session or some kind of a meeting where we take it to the next level and say, okay, what are the implications of what we've learned? So I'm sorry for the very long-winded answer, but I had been thinking about this since I read your report, and you've all sparked some thinking in me today, but that's where I'd really like us to be able to have that conversation. And just one last thing, because I probably said it last time, but I have had this dream of having a diagnostic center at Valley Medical Center that was easy for people to access. But even VMC isn't easy for people to access. And so this issue around access is something we really need to dive into, because having the service is one thing, then being able to access it, and then frankly, once you get the information, being able to go somewhere with it. I mean, it's complex, and in some ways, it really doesn't need to be. And I do believe the complexity is rooted in resource and our philosophy around access. I mean, depending on whether that's an insurance company or a nonprofit or for-profit.
Yeah, I would add, excuse me, Supervisor, but I would add to access around the philosophy of access, but mandates as well. So SARC was part of our work group, just as you know. And
Oh, great.
one of the things
Yeah.
that Howard Doy shared with us was that the lack of understanding and knowledge of providers, but it's also the community, families themselves, is what they're mandated and who they can really serve, and they have no control otherwise. So how do we fill in the gaps of mandates with others that can serve where the mandates are present? And then how do we communicate effectively who is mandated to do what, and then who fills in the gaps? I think we're challenged to be creative in that aspect and be innovative.
Dave, did you want to make any comments on this area?
Obviously, you've given a lot of thought to it. I mean, certainly a subject I've given a lot of thought to as well, but you, I think, characterize where we need to go well. It sounds like a good process. I would just say, and it's probably part of a footnote that you didn't mention, once the folks are in a room and they come up with shareable information, including what's shareable, that it should come back to this group, this committee, or some Brown Acted kind of a domain, so everyone can hear about it in usual transparency. It strikes me a little bit in just listening to Jolene's comments a minute ago. There's a similarity to the prior item in terms of that you were talking about. Can we get away from what the federal definitions are as as sort of a constraint or a given? And I suppose what I've learned more than anything over the last year or two about this subject is that we really do have to have very broad-based, holistic, I don't even know if definitions is the right word, expectations as to who and what we're dealing with, and what their needs might be. I think the arguments about who we're going to stigmatize and who's afraid of being stigmatized and a lot of things like that, I don't want to get overly philosophical here on something that's much more detailed than that, but I think some of that gets in the way as well. Just because this child is behaving in this way, don't call that out as a clinical issue because you're going to stigmatize. Well, if we get violence a year or two down the road that's significant, or something that harms other people, how important was that stigmatization issue, and or how important might it have been for us to get beyond it in a thoughtful and careful and appropriate way, so that we could head off what might happen next. So I came up, as Jolene knows, with kind of in the early days of the philosophy of early intervention and prevention, but we're still dealing way too much with enforcement on the back end of what happens when you don't do the intervention and the prevention, or you're afraid to, or we're constrained, or we're unable to cross these sort of artificial but real boundaries with the law, or we're afraid to cross those in our own community who may be providers or clinicians who are saying, don't stigmatize that family or that person, by jumping to conclusions about whether this child is bad or good. Nobody is saying bad or good, I think. Here, what we're saying is, let's make sure that we're intervening at the earliest opportunity, and resources and things like that are not getting in our way, getting in the way of us doing what we all know we need to do. So what you said, I think, is just a great place to go next. So I'm all for that. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, and I'm gonna just say we have about 5 more items on our agenda, so I'd like to do 2 more comments and then and then move on. Go ahead, Evelyn.
So I wanted to ask, get a little more clarification. When we talk about looking at a deeper dive into assessments broadly, there are many and varied types of assessments that come through several different paths. And so are we looking at the systems of systems, or is there a particular set of systems of assessments that we're looking at? So developmental for children under 5, educational for educational impact through the school district.
I think that what we have to look at is that the county, so from if we were just to look at kind of our book of business, is we end up needing to support every child who falls out of one of these systems in a crisis. And so what I would suggest is that even if what you decide to do is you go back and you take a look at any assessment that we deem a child between the age of 0 and 22 would need could need. Now, it doesn't mean that we would take a deep dive on every single one of them, but let me just give you the two end results that I would like to see us have. One is, I think every child who ends up who lives in our community should have, for lack of a better word, a passport that shows where they've been so we can better help them get where they need to go. A tool that the schools can use, a tool that we can use, a tool that is something that makes it easy for us to see what services a child's received or benchmarks they've gotten to better determine what kind of help they may need in the future. Something that is a living, dynamic kind of life plan that we can support if a child ends up in our custodial care or is in need of a particular service. That would be my ultimate goal. The part of that goal is making sure that the caregivers have the tools they need to be able to both access a particular service, but then be able to interpret and frankly, be able to walk that child through, to be able to get whatever needs and services that they need and frankly should have access to. So that's kind of the big picture. The little things that, like the reason I was so interested in having a diagnostic center is that we have become good at serving subpopulations, because I would actually say it the opposite way. Actually, I was listening to your point about we have subpopulations whose needs aren't being met. I think it's actually the opposite. I think we have subpopulations whose needs are really being met, and then we have a lot of other people in the system that the system's not designed, any system is not designed or elements of it to support. So for example, you might be, if you're Medi-Cal eligible, and in some areas, we pay a lot of attention to you, and it may be because not in a bad way, but we know how to finance and support a child going through a particular system because they're attached to that Medi-Cal, thank God, right? In other systems where they might have a very high deductible on a kind of a crummy insurance, how much help what's the path for that kid? We have a nonprofit that may take the Medi-Cal, but we don't have anybody who's going to take this kid who's just underinsured. So those are the kinds of, if we could get to a place where that we really would be able to utilize information and frankly know when someone skipped steps, because we have some families that don't take children, except thank goodness you need certain things for school, or we'd have a whole bunch of people that would never get anything, right? And thank goodness for the nonprofits that are here in the room that have been advocating for families and helping people make those connections. But the other thing is, think about this. If you were going to go to any of you who shop online, those of you who are guilty, raise your hand. But people make that so easy. It's almost idiot-proof, right? You could have a package land on your doorstep, on your head if you needed it to. It'll be delivered. I mean, we make that easy. This system is the opposite, right? I mean, it is the opposite of easy, and that's how we know we're not in the right place. So in any case, I would, Evelyn, you're a smarty pants, and I'm going to say to you, you may come to me and say, you know what? And as a group, you may say, look, here's what we decided to look at, and here's why. And I think that when we start, we may have to start a little narrow and expand out, but it shouldn't be so narrow that we're not capturing the kids who end up in need of our services, which is every, kids in need, really. But thank you. Anybody, did we have one last comment? Oh, I'm sorry, Kathleen?
Just that you might have had public input.
Oh, do I? I do. Thank you so good. Good girl. Barbara Hansen. I'm so sorry, Barbara. I almost forgot you, and I don't know how that's even possible. Thank you.
Since a squeaky wheel gets the turn, I'm here about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, how it relates to what's going on today. Briefly, the statistics about fetal alcohol is 1 in 20, according to the CDC, 19 times more likely to end up in jail if you have FASD, and most of them recidivate. Presently, the prison law office that gave the jail some guidelines about finding people with disabilities consists of one thing, that is to read at the 4th grade level, which does not begin to expose people with disabilities in our jails. It costs $2 million a year for each person with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, $4 billion annually. My nephew was in, who's fetal alcohol syndrome, checked himself into an emergency room 65 times in 1 year. When I served at juvenile hall 25 years ago, I asked the psychs there to please test for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It was met with something like that, so like climate change, it doesn't exist. Since then, I'm really happy to tell you that the DSM-5 now has something that's called neural behavioral disorder prenatal alcohol exposed, so that this gives a pathway for assessment. It also, and then incredibly good news for us this morning. We had an hour-long conversation with the California Department of Education, we're very, very, very close under code 56306 to get fetal alcohol spectrum disorder named under other health impaired, so it will be a category for special education services. So this is a lifelong disorder. It's brain damage. It's from prenatal up to grave, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed through our screenings and through our assessments. It could be what is the basis for all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much, and if I could just ask if, Evelyn, if you could work with Amy in my office and we can take a look at a timeline and what's the best mechanism for reporting back. But thank you all very much for taking the time to take a dive on that. Thank you.
Thank you for diving in. Thank you so much.
We're now going to move to item 7, and this is our Intern and Earn Program report. Thank you. Oh, thank you. So Frank is reminding me that there is a correction to item 13, and Ignacio Guerrero's title is Director Child Support Services, not Director of DFCS, which I'm sure was a surprise to somebody that you got a change in title there. This will be reflected in the minutes, and thank you very much for understanding our mistake. Welcome.
Good afternoon again, Supervisor Chavez, Supervisor Cortese, and members of the committee. Again, thank you for the opportunity to have us here and giving us this time to highlight our Intern and Earn program. With me, I have Rajni Shah from the Office of Research and Evaluation, and she'll co-present with me. Since 2015, the county has provided employment opportunities during the summer for our young adults. Over the last 4 years, the program has evolved. And today, we will take a look at the highlights of the 2018 program. The County of Santa Clara Intern and Earn program provides employment-based youth services to participants in the foster care program, the CalWorks, and the CalFresh program. We presently have a total of eligible population of about 6,300 kids in our CalWorks, CalFresh, and foster care system. If we drill it down, and you'll see foster care, we have about 500 foster cares in the system that could benefit from the services. Roughly about 1,000 CalWorks youth, and a little bit over 4,700 youth in the CalFresh program. The Intern and Earn program has 2 primary components to serve our youth: the paid internship and the year-round workshop program. This past summer, the internship was 6 weeks long, and youth were able to work up to 30 hours per week and earn $15 an hour, which was really above the San Jose minimum wage of $13.50 in 2018. The year-round program provides youth with a curriculum that covers a wide range of topics that relates to both employment and life skills development. The workshops are generally offered at multiple times throughout the week and throughout the county. So some of the highlights for 2018, just a really quick recap. The Intern Marketing Campaign is a year-round effort to provide program information, recruitment, and outreach to both youth and the parents. In addition to traditional phone outreach, the Employment Services also uses postcards, mailers, robo-text, which is the automated text messages, and our employment counselors do a personalized text message to the youth. You know, that's a way of communicating with our youth nowadays. This past year, the program efforts in marketing included close to 11,000 postcard mailers, a little bit over 9,000 robo-text messages, and 2,300 direct text messages to engage the youth. That resulted in, we served 482 youth who participated in the 6-week internship program. And if we break it down, it's 150 youth in the foster care program. Our goal was 150, so we met that goal. In the CalFresh program, our goal was 100. We met that goal. The goal for CalWorks, which is, by the way, covered by federal funding, was 300, and we were a little bit short on that. It's 231 CalWorks youth that we served. The challenge there with the CalWorks program is that if we were to meet our goal of 300, that means that we would have to enroll 1 out of 3 CalWorks youth. So a little bit of a challenge here, but we have some strategies for next year. The Intern year-round workshops served 249 unique youth, many of which attended multiple workshops. The workshops attendance has proven to be an ongoing challenge for both the program, for ATH and the youth. Some of the factors is the travel time between the school and the workshops locations, conflicting after-school activities. Some of them do have sports and study time. One of the big items that we saw is just general disengagement after the internship ends. Some of the things that we're doing in 2019 to remedy that is we will have a structured transition plan to keep the youth engaged after the summer internship. We also were looking at guest speakers. So if you guys are available, we will have you over for one of our workshops. And this is in an effort to keep them engaged and really looking at public service and business leaders that can really mentor or serve as a mentor for the youth. We're also looking at college resource night for youth that are interested in post-secondary education. We are also looking, we're exploring on-campus workshops. And as a matter of fact, we have a meeting with some of the districts next week just to explore having workshops on site. And then the one key is really keeping the ongoing communication between the youth and the employment counselors. I'm going to turn it over to Rashni to walk us over the.
And I'm going to ask you to be really brief, and I apologize. We had been a little bit bossy about everybody be 5 minutes because we knew it was going to be busy today, but we started late, so I apologize.
No problem.
No problem at all. Does this?
Yeah, it's where you just have to talk loud.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Well, maybe it's not on. Try again.
Does it work?
there
I
you
hear
go.
myself. Good. So the Office of Research and Evaluation collaborated with the Department of Employment and Benefit Services in order to evaluate and look at the short-term and long-term outcomes of the youth that are participating in the program. So the way that the evaluation was designed was that before the youth entered into the program, they completed a short survey with questions around the 5 domain areas that we were interested in and did a post survey after the internship was done. There are a lot of great findings. Just to keep it brief, I'll cover some of the key ones. The first was that 85% of the youth who completed the post survey said that they wanted the internship to be longer than 6 weeks. We had 93% of the youth who agreed or strongly agreed that the internship was an experience that they felt would help them find a job in the future. 4 out of 5 of our youth, so 80% of them, agreed or strongly agreed that the internship could actually help them find job opportunities and help them identify their careers in the future as well.
Wow.
And 92% of our youth, which is actually higher than last year in 2017, were interested in returning for the internship again next year in 2019. In addition to this survey, we had one more survey, which was actually getting the feedback from the worksite supervisors. So the worksite supervisors were giving us their thoughts, their comments on both the interns' accomplishments, areas of weakness and strength, as well as where the program could improve as well. 2 of the main things that came out of that survey were that 90% of these worksite supervisors were really satisfied with the performance of the interns. 90%, that's very high. And almost 100%, 99% of the worksite supervisors were interested in returning again next year in order to supervise these interns. And so having this baseline data and then again the post data really helped us in terms of looking at what the youth were interested in.
So some of our next steps that we're hoping that you guys move forward to the full board is we're really looking at expanding the number of weeks that.
And Rafael, we have all those recommendations, and I think we're good.
All right.
I mean, you've got the 2, like, I think he innovated it, and I've been just bugging you guys about it. And I just wanted to say a really, really special thank you to all, and if you could share this with the staff, the young people that we interacted with felt so supported and so excited that we have had a number of young people contact us even directly right after the internship. And frankly, you know, I'm out in the world, and so I've gotten an earful about what they liked and what they didn't like. And so I just want to tell you thank you for taking their thoughts into consideration. And this, we'll take a vote to support the next steps around the recommendations that you've made here. And Dave, if you could make that as a motion, and we'll make sure that we support that to the board.
Yes, so moved.
And Dave, thank you, and thank you all, and I'll second it. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Please share that with the staff. All right, so we're going to go to the item 8, which is our foster care out-of-home placement contracts report. Could you turn that mic on? There you go.
Hi, on now. Good afternoon, committee members and supervisors. I'm Dan Little. I'm the Assistant Director at Department of Family and Children's Services.
Could you put the mic on?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Larry Merker, Program Manager with the department.
Great.
So I'm going to give a brief overview of our out-of-home placement annual report. This is actually the second part of the report looking at specifically the service interventions. So the report population for this are the fiscal year 2017-2018, and the focus population are children aged birth through 17 years. During this, there were 1,401 youth in care in fiscal year 2015-2016. And then 2017-18, there were 1,224, which was a 12.6% decrease. That continues a downward trend of youth in out-of-home care that we've seen. The ethnicity of youth experiencing out-of-home care during 2017-2018 has not changed significantly from the previous fiscal year. The majority of children in foster care are Latino, 62%, followed by white at 20%, black 10%, and Asian Pacific Islander at 7%. The demographics show that Latino youth are nearly twice as represented in foster care as they are in the general population. The format of this report aimed at being data-driven as opposed to being descriptive and subjective. Format allowed us to look at data for specific youth and tied to specific outcome measure and specific service interventions. And then for this report, we looked at the effectiveness in the areas of placement stability and timeliness of service provision, as well as overall compliance and linkages to services. So I'll go pretty briefly over the types of interventions outlined in the report, and then Larry can provide some of the key findings. So we have intensive treatment foster care services, which is the ITFCS, public health nurse visitation program is HVP, wraparound KDA services, family-focused support services, which is FFSS. That's a stabilization program for youth placed in family-like setting and assist with transitioning home, specifically targeting youth who are at risk for disruption. Then we have placement services and crisis stabilization response team, PSCSRT. That's really geared towards youth that are either at the receiving center or are at risk for entering the RAKE or the receiving center. And then short-term residential therapeutic programs, STRTP. So with that, I'll turn over to some key outcomes from Larry.
Thank you. So as indicated, we looked at whether or not services were actually having an impact on the stability of youth in placement. So specifically examined what happened to youth over a 3-month period from the point of service initiation. So some of the things we wanted to lift up was, for example, ITFCS, Intensive Treatment Foster Care Services. There were 23 youth that participated in this program. At the end of the 3-month period, 96%, or 22 out of the 23 youth, remained in the same placement. The one other youth happened to go AWOL. One of our largest contracted providers, RAP Services, there were 180 of our highest needs youth that participated in or received RAP services during the time frame. The desired outcome that we're looking for was whether or not they maintained placement stability or they transitioned to a lower level of care. We noted that youth were, after the end of this period, were more likely to go to a less restrictive placement, 26%, versus a higher level of care, 7%. And of the children and youth who engaged in wraparound services, 96% avoided placement in congregate care during that 3-month time frame. For the home visiting nurse program, the emphasis was really on the compliance of referral. We noted that 87% received services within the 3 months of entering foster care and over 90% by 6 months. Luckily, the referral process previously had been a manual one of getting authorizations, sometimes getting parental consent, et cetera. Something I'm excited about, it's finally becoming automated. I learned about that during the process of working on this. And so as children come into care, nurses will receive a computer-generated list to make sure that there's no gaps, and all those youth who are eligible will hopefully get services. A couple of the other services we looked at were the FFSS, the Family Focused Support Services. 91% of the youth were maintained in non-congregate care setting during that time period. With PSCSRT, which is really a 30-day program, we found that their response time on 98% of the cases that they received was actually within 30 minutes.
Gentlemen, I'm going to just stop you there and ask a question, although maybe I should let you go ahead. Next steps, maybe you'll answer it. Sorry.
Okay. So we have 4 areas for next steps. We have continuum of care reform. We have contract performance expectations and data collection. We have our ongoing CQI efforts, and then embedding our child and family practice model. So regarding continuum of care reform, or CCR, one of the things we're working on is the level of care, or LOC, is the method to ensure that the needs of the youth are known by the foster family, and then the foster families are reimbursed based on the level of intervention they're providing those youth. So we've developed a electronic solution to that, where social workers can complete that form on their phones with the caregiver to expedite that process. So it's currently being piloted with some of our social workers. All of our staff have been trained on level of care. We're working on training for the caregivers for level of care. We are waiting on a final definitions from the state. As soon as that gets in place, we'll finalize some of the training pieces. Regarding identified gaps in contracts and performance expectations, Our Office of Contract Management has been working with Office of Research and Evaluation to embed logic models within our new RFPs that help to align some of the data collection and design and align some of the outcome measures. We're also working with, recently we've started working on a logic model that aligns the outcome measures with DFCS specific outcomes, so that regardless of the contract or regardless of the service, we'll start seeing success measured in safety, permanency, and well-being, which is some of the language for the Department of Family and Children's Services.
So I'm going to just stop you there, mostly just because I know we need to do 3 more big things. The report, the actual written report, will be available in February?
I believe yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to ask is that for the February meeting, I don't know where, oh, Amy, sorry, I just talked to you. That for the February meeting that we attach the report, we'll leave it on consent, but I want to be able to look at the report, and if we have questions, then we'll ask you to report out. The real question I would like you to answer, just in a cover to that report, is whether or not we can take the data that you are presenting, construct it into a dashboard that the Board of Supervisors could get on a monthly basis, because I do think that part of how we better understand, again, the overall approach and investment really has to do with where are young people in the pipeline of our services, as I said earlier, but also some of the main indicators that we should be considering that should give pause, warning for funding, for any of those other kinds of significant interventions or support that you need. Because the system's complicated, I think part of the reason it's hard to dive in on this, as you all know, is that anytime you pull a string, it pulls 5 other things. And so if you had to pick the 5 or 6 top things that you would say look at, or 10, here's what you need to look at once a month, I'd be interested in knowing what those are. Just your recommendation, and then how possible it is to do that at what pace. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, gentlemen. And thank you very much for being prepared to present this, even though I know it's been hard to get the report done, so thank you. All right, we're going to move on then to item 9, and this is youth summer camp activities. Now, I had asked this to be agendized because I had a concern about our approach and making sure that lots of kids in our care had access to this. So what I want to do is give you all a couple of minutes, literally just a few minutes, to present with a max on 5, and then I just want to be able to talk next steps, if that's okay. So if folks can introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is George Montes with the Social Services Agency, and with us here are our partners.
Good afternoon. I'm Denise Marshu, the Executive Director for CAFPA.
Good afternoon. I'm Socal Felice, the Program Coordinator for CAFPA.
Am I on? Good afternoon. I'm Crystal Chavez. I work for the Office of Contracts Management.
And right behind us is the City of San Jose that has been great partners in helping us.
Oh,
plan
there
this
you
as
are.
well.
Good. You guys should come up here because I think it's you I want to have a conversation with. So mosey on up. Welcome.
So I'm not sure. Do you want us to go through?
You know what? Actually, thank you. I might just be able to ask my ask questions. So one is I know this is a new program, and I also know that part of how this program got crafted was all of us having kind of a series of conversations as part of our foster youth task force group, and then I think I had a conversation with Angel, which is how we ended up where we are today. And we did this as part of the budget process last year. What I really want to understand, and let me tell you what I wanted from the program, and then I want you to tell me whether or not that's something that the City of San Jose can deliver on. So what I was hoping is that we could partner with you all for foster youth. I know we have other high-need kids, so I don't want to leave them out, but I'm really focused on our foster youth because they have the biggest challenges to getting services. To make sure that Young people could have not just one, but even multiple weeks of activity over the summer, because I know, especially in the beginning, we're going to have fewer people applying. And I was interested in partnering with the city of San Jose, particularly on their specialty camps, because those are so hard for our kids to ever have access to. And and if the city of San Jose can't provide the service, I want to be able to find partners that can. So for example, you have a sports camp. I actually, sadly for you, I'm very familiar with your camps because I look every summer at all the activities and all that. And as my son was growing up, I navigated that. I actually thought I could start a business just helping families navigate that summer mess, which you guys do, right? You have people call saying, I need my kid to be taken care of for this number of weeks. Really? Oh, goodness, there's an app. Someone, darn it. Anyway, thanks, Dave. And if we didn't have capacity, if you didn't have capacity, that we would be able to go to, for example, San Jose State has a football camp, and they have a lot of activities for kids that are older than 12 that aren't uncool. I don't know how to better say that kids would want to do them, or soccer camp, or whatever those are. So what my concern is it sounds like some of the camps are already capped, and I'm really wanting to make sure that our kids have access, and/or we rethink this for a broader group of camps outside of the city of San Jose. Because my intention wasn't just to have it be the city of San Jose, although that's how it kind of ended up because I did it so fast. And I'm sorry, George. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. First off, I want to thank you and your office for providing us the opportunity to provide these programs for the foster youth in the summer. It's great to hear your comments because that's really what we've been working on for the last 2 weeks to target those specific camps. So we break up our camps into different categories throughout San Jose. Our leisure camps are the category that you're talking about is our specialty camps, and those are the specific camps that we have targeted for this program.
And what would an example of that be, just so we're using the same language?
It could be a Lego camp, it could be a sports camp, like you said, a basketball camp.
Happy Hollow camp?
We did not have Happy Hollow, but we can go back and look at that.
I want every slot that's open. Right? I'm serious. Okay. Like Happy Hollow, that's the kind of thing our kids would never have access to. It's expensive relative to other camps. At least this is my recollection from sticking my son in.
Yeah, that one's definitely a higher cost camp.
Yeah,
but yeah, we
and
can
that's why
definitely
we
go back.
wanted to put money into it. So, okay, so that's what I mean by specialty. But you mean by specialty a defined other than like Dinosaur Week or Lego Week. I mean,
So our signature camp that we have in the city of San Jose is called Camp San Jose. It's our traditional full-day camp. We don't call that a specialty camp or a leisure camp. We didn't target that for this program. We targeted our other camps that are run at all 10 of our community centers that focus on a specific activity, whether it's Lego, arts and crafts, dance, sports, all of those categories and all of those camps, like you said, that most of these kids wouldn't already have access to. There are more expensive camps and more niche camps that we're going to offer.
so on the document I saw, it said that we needed a parent. You had to be open to having a parent or guardian participate in the.
There are some camps that we have for younger children that are between the ages of 0 to 2 that require a parent participation piece, but that's very, very few.
And that's 0 to 2?
Yes.
And do you have the language? Is the language on everything just so you don't get in trouble for not having it included on some versus others? You know what I mean? More protective than.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
When the parent, when the guardians, the foster youth come to register, all of our language is very specific of all the camps and the requirements.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you introduce yourself?
My name's Hal Spangenberg. I'm the recreation superintendent for the city of San Jose and the Parks and Rec Department.
I'm sorry. Say your first name.
Hal.
Hal. Thank you. Thanks very much. So, Hal. And actually, George, I'll ask you this: we're open to kids getting multiple weeks of camp, not just limiting them to 1 week.
That's correct.
And do we have a cap? Is it like 3 weeks or?
We haven't assessed like the capacity yet, just because we are at the onset of registration. And depending how many people register to these camps, then we're going to determine to get a better handle and understanding of what our capacity is. But today, we have 20 different camps, and we also have Richmond activities that are customized to an individual's needs. So I don't anticipate that through our resources we're going to cap out.
Okay. So here are the three things I want to make sure happen. One is I absolutely understand we're going to learn. I think we got the money like at the end last year, and it was unfortunate. So I just want to accept that, you know, we started late. So I recognize we're going to learn and we're going to make some mistakes. I'm not freaked out about that. What I am really focused on is making sure that on our end that we are really providing support so foster families know that this is available to them. Second, that if we run into a problem where we have a higher desire for sports camps or enrichment camps, that we're really working with San Jose to make that accommodation for our kids, but that if they can't do it, that we're finding partners that can. And there are some interesting opportunities that we have that I don't know if the city of San Jose can partner with us to facilitate this, but like I said, San Jose State has a football camp, and it's for older kids. It ranges, I think, from, I want to say kind of 13 to 17 or, you know, maybe 18. And then, you know, like the San Jose Giants have a baseball camp, and it's right in our backyard. Like kids can physically get to these places. I know and they don't require equipment. Like they're not hard for a kid to just come and play, recreate. So I want to make sure that if we see a higher interest in some camps, that we have the flexibility to invest in those, again, as a test. We may determine that the camp's not right or they're hard to work with. Part of the reason I was so interested in the city of San Jose is I know people are fingerprinted. I know they're not, I don't have to worry about our kids. The other camps, again, I should honestly say my son had a good experience with them, so that's where you get that from. Does the Guadalupe River Park and Gardens, do they still do a camp? Do you know do they partner with you on that? No. But that's an example. That's a science camp that's actually right in downtown. Like I want kids to be able to get there, and so if we could just check on that. At the end of this, what I want to be able to evaluate is how many kids did we talk to, how many people were we able to make this available to, how long were kids able to use it, and once they signed up, did they access it? And then we have that hop and ride program for school. We might need to kick it in for camp, because some of these kids may not be able to get to camp outside of hop and ride. So if we can expand that so that we have access to rides for kids for this, I think is really important. Any concerns about anything I just said?
On our end, we don't have any concerns as part of the capacity of our camps. We definitely think that we can manage the influx of the foster youth in our camps, specifically to the camps that we're targeting. We're also working closely with George and his team on how to get that referral process. That was our main concern before speaking with George, was how are we going to access the foster youth, because we don't have access to that database or the families. That's where they come in the referral process.
You two should actually have coffee or something, because she's got your families.
Right.
Okay.
And on our end, the registration piece and the families being able to access our programs, that's what we do every day with our scholarship methods and our registration process. So it's pretty easy on the back end for us. It's just a matter of the referral process and those families coming to us to register.
Right, and we might have to think even about that, like coming to you to register. You mean online, filling something out?
They'll actually have to come to the community center. They have 10 sites that they'll be able to register at, because they'll be coming with a referral letter. We're also going to hold a resource fair on February 23rd, where they can come and register as well.
Why do you have people go to the center to sign up?
For this program, they'll have to have a referral letter, which will be able for our staff to trigger them not having to have a fee for their program. If they sign up online, they'll have to pay a fee.
Because you just don't have a mechanism for like a code?
Yeah, we would have to see the letter, the referral letter, the documentation that they're a part of the program.
Supervisor Chavez, if I could chime in on this one here. One of the challenges with our program was to connect the foster youth that resides with the Department of Family and Children's Services and the Association of Foster Care. And we felt that the best way to connect those two populations to the city's resources was through a referral process, where we identify these families that they are foster care families, and then we give them a kind of like a letter for them to get priority in these camps and also to access these free of charge.
So I think that sounds painful. And if we really want people to access it, and I'm going to go back to the idea, honestly, if I were shopping, someone would give me a code that said, go here. So what I am concerned about is that for families that already have a hard time getting someplace, then getting to sign up, and then frankly, how do you know how many slots to hold if you're, I mean, I know you're kind of dealing with a lot of different things. So here's two things I would say. One is if we do the live sign up, if you're doing a fair, I would want people to be able to sign up right there and not have to do another thing. So if they're at the fair, they get to sign up. The other thing I would suggest is that most people have phones that they can take a picture of the letter and attach and figure out a way to send the letter to an email so that they're not having to make extra trips. That's just hard for people to do. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at that, and if the system doesn't allow that now, I will say this, I haven't looked at, I haven't signed a child up in a long time for science camp or anything like that, but it would surprise me if the camps didn't also have that box for a code that you could put in your discount, because that's how people shop now. And I don't know if that doesn't happen with, and I'm not talking about the city of San Jose, but private sector camps. My guess is that they do that they have a mechanism for that. You could put a box on your I apologize, a computer box that has them reference the County of Santa Clara. You could forward the forms to us, then we don't have to make it hard for them. You could forward it to Denise maybe. So in any case, work on that, because that sounds not helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something to definitely look into. Definitely want to simplify the accessibility to the families as much as possible. We will be signing, registering people at the actual auditorium on when is it? The 23rd as well. It's just the challenge has always been on how do we give the city those referrals that they know are coming from us to prioritize. And that's where the gap is, that's where the challenge is, but definitely looking at ways to simplify it is a good goal.
If I can add, so February 23rd is our first day of registration for summer camps for the public. We targeted that day for the fair to somewhat give, I wouldn't say prior to registration because it starts that day, but in order for spots to be in the camp for sure for anybody coming on February 23rd to register. So there won't be anybody registered before then for any of the camps that we're offering. So if there's a way that we can focus on getting people to that fair and registering them on that day, I think that might help.
Yeah, I'll just say again, that's, a lot of people do this stuff online, and for some of our foster families, they have their own children, and then they have foster children, and then they have, activities on the weekends. I mean, it's just it's like the number one thing people told us was, well, two things. One, transportation, but two, recognizing that they're juggling, a lot. And one other thing I'll just say, and maybe this is something we think about, is that when we are looking for beds for drug and alcohol rehab and other things, we sometimes buy the beds and then fill them. And we may want to have to think about that in the inverse, because really what we should be doing is blocking off some number of slots for these camps, and maybe that's where we start this year, and then work to fill those slots. And at the worst thing that happens is that we let a slot go, because frankly, those slots get open and someone's going to snap them up. I mean, so we should just think a little bit about that. I would just encourage you to do that before the 23rd, because otherwise, anyway, we'll learn that. And if it doesn't work this year, we'll look at another way to do it. It's just that, well, you all know you love these kids as much as I do, so I don't have to I'm leaving the choir alone. And I was being disciplined about 5 minutes for every topic until you caught my attention, Hal. So get these kids signed up. Denise, I'm just going to ask that, any assistance that we can be, please let us know. And I know we're testing this, but the other thing is if we think we're going to be, if the city has, if we have some structural problems, the other thing we might want to do is think about finding a couple of nonprofit partners that we can also test with at the same time. And, just see what works for our families, because that's a hassle to have to go and you have to make sure the slot's open. That's terrible. And then if they go and the slot's not open, that's even more annoying.
Yeah, if I could just say one thing. First of all, we are so grateful for this. You don't know how many families, even in our short amount of time last summer, that we were able to sign up for enrichment programs and camp just during that last 6 weeks or so. One little boy in particular, Donovan, has autism and was able to go to a program that his family has not been able to afford for him. And so that was huge for us, having that opportunity for this little child to go to that program and us being able to pay for it through this program. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that. We are doing other outreach in the community too, letting families look and see what's designed for their child, because not all children are going to be okay to go to some of these camps.
Yeah, and we'll learn that.
They
And Denise,
have needs and stuff, so we appreciate the fact that we
and
can
Denise,
do that.
make a list of what we didn't do this year. That way we can really be thinking about it. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the City of San Jose being our fast partners on this. I know that what we're asking you to do isn't easy and it's a little bit complex, so we really, really do appreciate your partnership. And I saw Andrea hiding back there. There she is. So, but let's figure this out and, take a couple paths and see what works best, and then we'll do a good evaluation at the end. And again, I know we're going to learn. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried, but I'm not worried about learning. I just don't want to, every summer you miss for a kid, they fall behind, and I don't want our babies falling behind. So thanks, everyone.
Good.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, our very patient first five. All right, first five, thank you. First five ended up being last today. I apologize for that, but I'm glad you're here. And the last shall be first. That's very holy of you. Oh, someone forgot their glasses. They're not going to get far. They'd be out in the car and saying, where are they?
So I will ask you, supervisors, how would you like us to handle this? Because I know your time is tight. I already have been working with Amy, and we've got it down, I think, really briefly, but I don't want to impose
Do you
on
mind,
you.
go ahead and, do you mind doing your brief presentation?
Sure.
This has been something we've been looking forward to, so.
So I'll open it. Jolene Smith, thank you, supervisors, for allowing us to present a brief overview of our annual report, of which you have the in-depth report, and feel free to call and ask questions anytime you want about that report. But today we're just going to keep it as brief as possible, and I'm looking at Amy like, I know. So what we did was we pulled out of our annual report, based on Amy's guidance, really where we wanted to share with you what we feel over the last year were the important factors. And then Keith's going to talk to you about our incarcerated parent pilot project, because I know that there was some interest in that as well. So I'll dive right in. If you can see that, as you well know, the first five is a declining revenue source. That's the good news. People aren't smoking. The bad news is our revenue drops because we rely on 50 cents for every pack of cigarettes in terms of our local revenue based on our percent of live births. By the way, our live births have also declined in our community for lots of reasons, and so our revenue is declining. But to compensate for that, we've really looked at and focused in on our goal of system alignment and really looking at policy. So as you can see on our pie chart, our revenue is about $14 million, which when we started out in 1998 was 27. So you can see the progression, or the regression, I should say. So we backfilled, if you will, supervisors, by really leveraging funding through partnerships and collaboration, both with county departments and community-based organizations, as well as our folks in the community, just our parents and families we serve. Everything we offer is based on prevention, early intervention, and treatment. So some of those deeper end services, we've been able to leverage Medi-Cal and EPSDT to draw, and as well as MA, Medi-Cal administrative dollars, and look for foundation support and other grants to backfill, if you will, our declining revenue. That's why First Five Santa Clara County has not made cuts to our partners, unlike our other counterparts throughout the state, because we've, in a sense, went out and reached and created the opportunity for sustainability with other third-party funding. So we've taken our roughly $14 million, and we've leveraged $18,689,000 to the point where in this community we have invested over $33.5 million. So that's quite an investment if you look at the prevention, intervention, and treatment services we've been able to do as a result of those leveraged dollars. That, if I pull out, is one of our stellar achievements over the last 2 years to create sustainability. So we don't, in our 10-year sustainability plan, we will have an average decline of only like 2.5% a year in our contracts and services because of this leveraged funding.
Wow.
So it's been aggressive. It takes a lot of work, but we're doing it and we're growing it. And then we take that to foundations and leverage their dollars in proof that we know what we're doing and we mean business. So if you look at our other key achievements that I think are based on that leveraged dollars, we've been able to increase last year in 17-18 we served, in 17-18 we served 57,000 children. In this current fiscal year, deep into 17 and part of 19, we're at 63,000 families we're serving, which demonstrates just exactly what I said. We haven't had to decrease. We've been able to increase based on our leverage funding approach. I'll just roughly say to you that more than 19,000 children are in our partnership with the Health and Hospital System and our pediatric clinics have screened over 19,000 children. I think what's important about that data point, that of those 19,000 screened, 40% of those were from pediatric docs, because we are aimed in the clinic settings. We are aimed at ensuring that at well baby checks, that's where children are screened, because then we lose the fragmentation more from a systems perspective. Children go to their well baby checks. So if we lay in the screening system in that setting, we know our kids will have access to developmental and health screenings. So 40% of our screenings this last year came from those settings, pediatric docs, community clinics, as well as our own county clinics. Of those 1,700 children, what we begin to look at is this inverted triangle approach. So universally screening, but then as we boil down kids who flag, where do they go from there? Then we look at 1,700 children identified some red flag. So then they went into our Kids Connection Network in partnership with the Behavioral Health Department, which includes home visitation, our deep end therapeutic services, but also engages what we were talking about before, Supervisor, that deep level assessment through KidScope, which is a regional assessment center within the health and hospital system, which connects to SARC and special ed. So for kids that hit in this Kids Connection Network, they are receiving those deeper end common assessments. The community-based organization model that we've developed bills Medi-Cal through the Public Health Department and EPSDT, as well as MA, and they provide the home visitation services and the connections to our Family Resource Center, where we are embracing more referrals for families for ongoing support through the Family Resource Centers that bill MA, Medicaid administrative dollars, which helps support them to the tune of about $2 million we were able to draw down through MA funding. As we move down over another important fact, because we promised Amy only 4, we have 8,000 children in our early learning settings which receive the following screens that are before you. I won't go over each one, but what's important is that we've embraced this whole child approach within early learning. So we looked at Bronfenbrenner's model around the ecology. Children don't grow in isolation of an early learning setting, but rather in the context of their family and their whole community. And then finally, you know that we are partnering with you very rigorously in the 2 pilots, Almrock and Franklin McKinley. We're there anyway, and so what we've done is we've done place-based approaches with them, serving whole families with all of our comprehensive systems. And our in-kind services with direct services, they're not just infrastructure support, in that pilot project is around a $7 million investment. So we know today, so that's it for us in a deeper dive of our annual report, but we know today that you're very interested in our incarcerated parent pilot. And so I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy Director, Keith Morales, who will give you another thumbnail sketch with the hope that questions you may have don't have to be today, but we're always available.
Thank you, Jolene, and good afternoon, committee members. I'm Keith Morales, Deputy Chief over at First Five, overseeing the Family Strengthening and Support Department where this program for the incarcerated parents lies. So just to give you a general overview and brief as possible, it is fundamental to our understanding and we recognize that losing a parent to incarceration is detrimental to the overall well-being of children. It's so much so that it's recognized as an adverse childhood experience, which really speaks to the level of need children who are impacted by incarceration are for system of care services that Jolene had alluded to earlier. And also, many of our county departments who we work cross-collaboratively with throughout Santa Clara County also believe that the impact of incarceration on children and families is detrimental, and it has also accepted us as part of that key component to the system of care for incarcerated parents that we're building currently throughout Santa Clara County. And the partners that many of them were here today, we could add a meeting, but you could see the list of partners here. I'll let you guys look at that at your time, but for the sake of time, I'll move forward. The pilot overview in fiscal year 17-18, we launched the Incarcerated Parent Program. And it was to really serve the parents that are incarcerated that have children 0 to 5. But in that process, we've been able to work with all parents of children under 18 and have included them in the pilot as well. Of the parents that are participating, many of them are caregivers as well that are prior to incarceration were the primary caregiver of children, which were aunts, uncles, and sometimes grandparents that were responsible for the life of the young child. And so we also have them included in this pilot as well. Our program specialists, of which we have 3, are currently serving the Elmwood facility, the main jail, and the reentry resource center across all the department programs and serve those families in alignment to the strategies and the systems that's already in place at reentry in particular. And the pilot snapshot, this is a snapshot of some of the highlights from our pilot since inception. 700 incarcerated parents and caregivers have accessed and been touched by the program. The number of children impacted by the program is over 1,200, of which 500 are at the age of 5 or under. The demographic highlights we have are also listed here, and I'll just cover the ones that I think are really critical, and the bottom 3. Approximately 44% of the pilot participants had a high school diploma, while 26% had less. And prior to incarceration, approximately 49% of the pilot participants had unstable housing. That is part of the information that we gather at the intake, and part of the reason why that number is obscure as to whether or not they're housed or homeless is because participants are a little bit wary of stating that they don't have a home address where they could be released to upon release. And 75% or 70% of the pilot participants are single. So those 3 are important because it speaks to the level of need prior to incarceration that children face. And when you add another layer, such as incarceration or removing or separating the family unit, that impact really speaks to the level of need of that child in the home. The identified challenges we have covered, I will cover very briefly and only highlight a couple of the ones that I think speak to us here at the table. One is isolation. Many of our participants, if they are immigrants, are fearful of and have been threatened also to, upon release, to access the child in the home because of fear of immigration policy. Another piece of that is access and cost with visitation. Parents are separated and have a lack of access to one another as a result of the costs associated with staffing the visitations for families to participate, as well as other costs like that are prohibitive, such as transportation and childcare during that time. The other cost is the phone calls, what it costs for participants to connect with their family at home becomes a burden for families, and as well as stigma and stereotypes. Parents sometimes feel like it's more detrimental to my child to hear me while I'm incarcerated, or I have to tell them that I'm at work or on vacation in many cases. And so many people are fearful of the impact that it will have on their child. So our program is really designed to help parents break through those barriers to connecting with their children at home. Part of that.
May I stop you just for a minute? I wanted to make sure that I just made a recommendation, if that's okay, and then just to see if we have questions, because I think actually we're both, I had a chance to read it, and I know Dave did too. Two things. One is based on Jolene's input, we're going to be doing a deeper dive into how we do the parent visits, which I'm really excited about, and also the educational parenting classes in custody. But the other two things I just wanted to make you aware of is that one, we have just gone out for an RFP on our phone calls so that we can lower the cost of those calls. And the other is the redesign of Elmwood, which this referral was tied to, will have the main jail will have a more flexible place for us to be able to do parenting classes. But I actually wanted to make a recommendation for this particular topic. I think there would be value in First Five presenting to our reentry committee. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of partners that you're already working with, but that can look more solidly at how the programming that you're doing needs to be connected both while they're in custody, but how that connection is drawn through the reentry center. And then the other thing I'll say is, as part of reentry, we're also in the process of trying to have a no-entry process. But that no-entry process is really focused on the individual's health, right? Medical, like, do they have a drug or alcohol addiction? Do they have mental health issues? What I don't know if we've dived into is what their role is as a parent. And so I think if you present to that committee, there's some alignments. That's just one that popped into my head, but there are really smart people around that table who are going to be able to, I think, help us do an assessment. I mean, not an assessment, but like really taking a deeper dive at the work that you're already doing. I don't know if you have thoughts about that, or if you've already been meeting with reentry.
Well, we have.
Okay.
We have as part of the reentry center a supervisor, but we haven't really had the opportunity to really say, why don't we present to the thought leaders that are around this committee with ideas, innovative approaches that we have. We do have a lot of innovative approaches for this population. We've been working with Aaron at reentry to really look at what's state of the art, what's coming down in lieu of so there's lots of new ideas statewide and nationally, and we've been working with Judge Manley, who has really helped us a lot and believes in what this pilot is demonstrating and the results, especially the connection upon release, but preventing them from ever getting there in the first place in lieu of incarceration.
So what we've been trying to think about are what services need to be provided to people so they don't have to be incarcerated to get the services.
Exactly.
But honestly, this has not come up as part of our planning, and I've been involved in most of those meetings. So I would love to have you present. And then the second thing, and I just wanted to, I know Dave's been really interested in this as well, but the second just sort of kind of question I have for you is that as part of our systems, I think when someone's in custody, we don't think of their parenthood unless they're pregnant, and even that is, it's not seeped into our culture. And I wonder, based on, and this could be something offline you could give us feedback or maybe give some thought to, about how we're doing a lot of trainings with our staff, implicit bias, a whole bunch of stuff. But again, I don't know if we're thinking about people's role as parents, and frankly, I don't even think we're thinking about their role as children. So for example, we have a lot of adults who are in custody whose parents are really interested in what's going on with them. But because they're adults, technically, we can't respond to questions. But sometimes the parent has the young adult's medication, mental health, it's just so we've been working with NAMI on that on that connection, but it's not a core part of the culture in terms of how we think about people who are incarcerated. Is we think about family ties relative to, oh, we know if we can fill out this box, if you have family ties, you're less likely to recidivate, but in terms of strengthening those ties. And then the last thing I'll just mention to you is I've asked the county to take a look at in reentry, to take a look at family finding, the way we are for foster care, but for people who are incarcerated, with an attempt to take whatever natural fibers of support they would have and really try to strengthen those rather than not take advantage of where someone may.
It's a great idea.
But since you're doing it for littles, it might be helpful to help us think about how we're doing that for bigs, for adults. So.
Everything you mentioned is, we have anecdotal data and stories about the barriers to exactly the areas that you just mentioned that kind of like break your heart when you hear about them, you know, in terms of the children and the services and those left behind. And before we work with the Probation Collaborative, of which all of them are there. Some of the partners Keith showed you before. The question wasn't even asked on the questionnaire when someone was arrested. Do you have children? Who's caring for the children?
Right.
I'm happy to and proud to say that the Probation Collaborative, now they're there. Those questions are there. But prior to that work, and we're only deep into this a year and a half, that wasn't even asked.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. I mean, that's a really excellent point. Those were all my comments. Did you have any, Dave?
Well, only in that area, and I'm not just picking up on the thread here. It's just that's in this particular area that would be my biggest concern. Not only data and identifying who has children, but then what happens in the anecdotal, heartbreaking stuff I hear is just from going over to Elmwood and going over there with community-based agencies that are working with the women and having them, when we ask them, or when Dr. Smith accompanies us and he asks them, what can we do to better support you? They say, I'd like to see my children. And we start asking them, what's that look like now? There's, for me, horrific anecdotal data about how infrequently that happens. And I know that you've been part of discussions with small groups about how to just wholesale change that. But I think some of that data is or should be available right now. I'd like to see a report, in this committee as to the frequency of visits and how, the correctional isolation that's imposed is interfering with parent-child visits. I'm talking again from a data standpoint. To me, I'm really not, I've gradually become an evidence-based person since I've been here because I come from a background where we just saw things happening, for example, in the schools, improving generally in a macro way, then it was good. Now everything's measured. But why aren't we looking at that data, which we have? The sheriff should be able to give us, or the undersheriff should be able to give us that. Those numbers, which then should provoke the conversation about, is that okay?
Right.
And what do we need to do policy-wise, or what can we legally do policy-wise to fix that or change it?
Right. We'd be happy to help you with what we do know already and bring it back to you, and then bring some of our partners back with us, because I think it's really important that you're fully informed around from a systems perspective. Because I will tell you, Supervisor Cortese, many of our moms aren't visited because who's caring for the children just don't do it. The opposition, that's why I embraced Supervisor Chavez's family find. Why aren't we ensuring that our children are in supportive settings while their parents are incarcerated that would bring their children to visitation? It's not always someone can't get there, it's they won't get there. And then in addition to that, the trauma we impose on children just through visitation. I know I wouldn't want to see my mom in stripes.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to think of this, this pilot, we're thinking of it from a complete whole system approach. If we're going to embrace serving the children and the families, the parents and caregivers, by the way, we have a lot of grandparents that are carrying their kids. They're in jail and their children are at home left with aunts and uncles. I mean, it's just this whole array of, it's time to really take a look at the system and bring folks together that are committed to looking at innovative practices, but good, solid data on what we need to do.
I guess one way to look at it, just, you know, being the lawyer that I am, is there fundamentally a right to parent? And if so, how is that being balanced with the loss of rights that come with breaking the law and incarceration? I don't think that discussion is happening anywhere.
No, it isn't, because unless your parental rights have been terminated through social services system, you are a parent.
Right.
Regardless whether you're incarcerated or not.
And I would say that right now, I think there's just an observation. I think, Dave, you raise a really good point. And one next step may be, one, I really do want to have you come to reentry because I think there are some connections that we can make there. But two, what we may want to do is structure another discussion, you know, both with First Five and with Lori and Rick, with the sheriff and the undersheriff, to have a discussion with them about this whole strain. I will say that one thing that's become really clear to me is that social network of who comes and visits, like one, it's been really kind of traditional that even per percentage, I was told by the former correctional leader Troy there that women don't get visited nearly as much as men, and that often women are more proactive in making those connections than other family members or men. So I do think it's worth us kind of taking a deeper dive on that, and maybe off agenda we can strategize a little bit about the best ways to do that, and then bring it back. But I think at the very least we should have a discussion with the sheriff and the undersheriff just to better understand this. And Dave, I'll follow up on behalf of the committee, asking the sheriff to help us get that data, because I think that's really good.
That's great, because we would love to take, that's the purpose of a pilot, yeah?
Yes,
to do
that's
that
right.
Deeper
To
dive
learn
and really examine where we want to go. Where is it that we as a county want to go in the incarcerated parent aspect, but also in service in the transition when they're released, even on maintaining that continuous support.
Well, and that's partly why reentry is so critical. Exactly. I just want to make that connection, but I think you're right. And the other thing is, I just want to say, I think particularly when we do pilots, that this really isn't about blaming anybody. It's really about learning, and if we can maintain that environment of learning, because I actually think we are thinking differently about this, like dramatically differently. So.
Good.
Thank you both. Thank you for the good work. I really appreciate it. I'm very sorry that we went so late. And we have two, so I'll say thank you. I know we have two follow-ups from that. One is AIM will work with Maya on getting this to reentry. And then two, I would just ask that we have a formal request to the sheriff about the visiting practices, both on who is there, but we should also maybe have a presentation about how visiting happens in the jail, just so that we can understand that at committee. And then we have two reports, and then we're going to roll on. So I don't know. You guys dive for those mics. Choose. Okay, Bob, it's you.
All right. So I just want to mention quickly that in the CalFresh program, due to the vagaries of all the different varying federal authorizations for program and funding, benefits for February had to go out early this month. So there is good news. There was the disbursement of the February CalFresh benefits. And one, we just wanted everyone to be aware of that. But secondly, what that means is there's certainly a lot of uncertainty around the future of the benefits if there's no resolution to the federal budget issues. And what that would mean, though, at a minimum, is that families receiving benefits now will have more than their normal, say, 4-week gap between their benefit disbursements, that it could be 6 weeks or more at this point. There's a lot of public information out there, a lot of press releases, a lot of media carrying this, but we're urging families to budget their disbursement very wisely, because this is going to have to cover the 6 weeks of time, not the normal 4 or so weeks.
That's not good. Thank you for telling us that. The only other thing I wanted to add to Bob's report really quick for this board is that Bob and I have been talking about doing a retreat where we'll take a few hours to really kind of realign. So one thing we want to take a look at is what reports do we have on here that we don't need anymore? What reports are by law so that we can perhaps post them, review them, but assume that they're going to be on consent unless there's a challenge with them. And then be able to kind of prioritize those areas that we want to take a deeper dive on in the next year to 18 months, particularly with an eye toward prevention, is sort of what we were talking about. So we'll work with all of you on scheduling that. All right, Ignacio.
I just have one item for my report. As you're aware, the governor released his budget for fiscal year 1920 on January 10th. The budget includes, for the first time in over 16 years, additional funding for California's child support program.
Wow, congratulations.
Specifically, an additional $56.5 million as the first of a 3-year phased-in augmentation in new funding. This was a joint effort by the Child Support Directors Association and State DCSS. The funding is intended to be allocated to 21 counties in the state that have the highest case-to-employee ratio. Fortunately, Santa Clara is not on the list, but as the saying goes, a rising tide raises all boats. The methodology used for funding is focused on a level of effort study, which identifies a workload threshold of 188 cases per employee. So if we, of which we are below, if we happen to go above that number, then we will be eligible for new funding, which is great. The methodology also provides for the fact that in the future, the state can approach the legislature with any additional requests, and now they have a funding methodology they can use to look at our requests, which has never happened before, without having to do any extensive program reviews or additional cost analysis. So this is a significant accomplishment for the program, and even though Santa Clara County is not getting additional funding, it definitely allows us to protect our existing funding and sets us up to be able to receive funding in the future based on that threshold measure. So it's a big accomplishment. Just wanted to mention that, and good news for the program overall.
It really is, but we have to get in there a little
Yes.
sooner. So, okay. Thank you very much. We are adjourned, and I do want to say thank you to everybody. I apologize the meeting was so long. Please drive carefully. Thanks, everyone.